Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tiffany D Writing Journey. I am trying to get back on track with posting every Thursday. Obviously, this video is not posted on a Thursday. But I am trying to get back there, and I did want to touch again on the same subject I did in my last video, and I will be doing for the whole month of June, and that's Alzheimer's and Dementia Awareness. The link for the Alzheimer's Association will be in the description for you to take a look at any information that might help you out if you are caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, or if you would like to donate to the cause, because it ultimately goes to a cure in the future. They are trying to find a cure for both Alzheimer's and dementia. It's hard to diagnose, and there are many different symptoms involved in it. So if you can, please, I'd appreciate it if you took some time, go check out their website. If you can donate, every little bit counts, even $1. Again, that link will be in the description of this video. Now, one of the blog posts that I've done was called "They Do Have to Eat." It's in regards to adding food into your story. I mean, it makes sense, right? As human beings and animals, everyone eats. So why wouldn't you include it in your storyline? Because we all eat to survive. What we're doing is we're trying to incorporate things like that into our stories, into our novels, because we want to make sure that we make it as realistic as possible. Our days revolve around meal times. Everywhere we look, there's restaurants, there's food advertisements, grocery stores, everything else. So our lives revolve around food because it's a survival aspect that we need in our lives. We have to eat to live. So when you're putting it in your story, you want to make it realistic like that. If it's a survival story, you're going to want to put in there that they're going to think about food. They're going to think about when they could get their next meal, how they're going to get their next meal. If they're starving, how long can they survive without eating? As far as other stories, you can really just keep it simple. It doesn't have to be an overcomplicated dish. It can be something that is super simple. If they eat a can of SpaghettiOs, put that in there. Just put something in there, because food is another way to tell the reader a little bit more about your character. It's giving away little bits of their personality in every little way that you can without having to use too much extra space to do so. I love reading that in a story. I love being able to read those details and go, oh, well, they're allergic to peanut butter. They don't eat that. That makes sense. That could come into play later in the story. Or, hey, they really love a certain food. They drink too much caffeine. They drink too much coffee. You can put stuff like that in there, what they're allergic to, what they're addicted to with food, their lack of wanting to eat very much and having to remind themselves to have a meal because they're so busy. There are little details you can put in there that really drive the point home on what their situation is and who they are as a person. It's really important to make it more realistic, more relatable. If it's relatable to everyday life, relatable to something they commonly see, then they're going to be more immersed in the story, and they're going to feel like it's more realistic. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert with any of this information, but this is how I write, and this is how I enjoy reading. If you're having trouble describing food in your novel, describing like how to put it together, just sit down and think, what did I eat today? How did I prepare it? What utensils did I use? What sounds did I hear? What smells came from the food? Little details like that can really help describe the scene for a mealtime, for a dinner, for a date that they go out on, different things like that. If you are describing a cooking procedure, in your novel, let's say they're cooking for the first time together. Let's say that's a date, or even if someone's just cooking with their family for the holidays or something like that, don't over describe the cooking procedures. I know that sounds kind of crazy because you do want detail, but as an avid baker and also someone who enjoys cooking, I did go to culinary school. I have done a lot of those things, and I love recipes, I love procedures, I love it detailed when I'm trying to do it. However, if you're writing your story and you have a reader, in fact, there's several readers out there who may not be interested in all that detail. They're not interested in hearing every aspect of the recipe because it's boring to them. For me, that sounds crazy. I love it. I love to be able to read a recipe and know exactly what I need to do. But that's me because I love to cook and I love to bake. But other readers may not feel the same way. So don't bore them with over describing, over detailing your recipe or procedure for cooking the food. Just keep it kind of short and simple. Like, let's say they're baking a cake, okay? Let's say it's coming out of just a box from the store. You know that there's eggs, oil, water, and how long you need to mix it for and things like that. But you can make it easier on yourself and on the reader for reading it and say that they grabbed a bowl, they mixed the ingredients together according to the box, they put it in the oven, and then they took it out when it cooled. If you're making someone make cookies with a child or something, I understand explaining a little bit more detail in there. You want the readers to be able to understand what they're eating, why they're eating it, and understand how it's going to affect the story in some way, or just describe more of the personality of the character. If it's going out to dinner or something that you do, you want to describe the scenery, the setting. You want to describe the restaurant they're sitting in. You want to describe the awkwardness between two people if it's their first meal together or something like that. You want to describe that stuff while also describing the food and letting the readers know, hey, this is what they're eating. This is why they ordered it. Especially for first dates or something. Generally, people will pick something that's not so messy. A good way to describe it is you don't want to eat like ribs with your hands on a first date. You know what I mean? People typically try and order is just something easy, a salad or something, you know, they don't want to eat too much because they're nervous. They're choosing to pick that certain meal for a certain reason. It tells something about their personality. When my husband and I went on our first date, we tried to get less messy meals, but they ended up being way bigger than we thought they would be. It was a really good restaurant and way messier too. So that's part of our story. We went through a pile of napkins trying to stay clean in front of each other, which is funny because people try so hard not to do stuff like that. And then we did the complete opposite on accident. That ultimately tell the story in itself for us and how comfortable we were able to get with each other and how fast we were able to get that comfortable with each other. So that's something to keep in mind too. It can drive the story along. It can move it forward. It can tell you more about the story by just a simple meal. Make sure you try to include some food, some meal times in there, because ultimately we all eat. You want to include realistic aspects to your story, and that's one of the ways to do it is by food. My next topic that I spoke about in my blog is actually means of transport. How do they get around? How do they get from point A to point B? That's the big thing. You want to describe how they get where they need to go on a daily basis. How do they get to work? How do they get to whatever next scene? That's basically what you're saying. Do they get a ride from someone? Do they take a taxi, a plane, or do they drive a car? Do they own a vehicle? Is it a vehicle that was left to them by someone they cared about that passed away? What is the story behind said vehicle? Why did they pick the color? Why did they pick whatever it is? I mean, people pick different vehicles for different reasons. Some get a pickup truck because they need to haul stuff a lot around their property and for their job. They just like pickup trucks. That could be a reason too. Even if you're not describing the entire vehicle, you don't have to go to crazy amounts of detail to describe a vehicle. You can just say they drive a blue truck and then make it a point to mention it later in the story for some reason. Maybe it has to do with the story. Maybe they're a police officer. In my story, that's one of my characters is a police officer. And descriptions of vehicles really help them do their job, because having that detail, having the color, the make, the model of the car, they can find that vehicle of that suspect that they're looking for. They can have that information and help them find that better. So that's something to keep in mind. You can use it in your story to drive the storyline forward. The same with food. In this case, with a vehicle, why do they pick that car? Why did they pick a red car? Maybe they're into sports cars and they thought a red car was a cool vehicle to have. It plays in the story later on why they picked that, why they like speed or whatever, and how it can affect them. Do they have an accident in the future? And it affects how they view things, and it affects the color of the car that they choose the next time and the make of the car. So it's just another way to incorporate that detail into it. And when you're looking up details for a vehicle, a great way to do that is researching car dealerships. When you go on a car dealer website, what do they have there? They have a description. They have pictures of every detail of that car, so you can see, does it have a GPS? Where are the buttons placed on the steering wheel? Maybe you have to answer a call when you're in the car, and you can describe, oh, they hit the button right there on the steering wheel on this side, or whatever. You can describe it, and you can give that reader that visualization in their head. You can help them see what you're seeing in your head for the story, and that will immerse them in the storyline, because that's really important. You want them to be immersed in that storyline. Another important thing to keep in mind though is you want to stick to a budget. I know it can be tempting to put your favorite vehicle in there. As I said in my blog, one of my favorite vehicles is a 69 Mach 1 Mustang, and it was very tempting to put it in my storyline. Don't get me wrong, I do love muscle cars. I was able to put a muscle car in my story. I made sure I put that in there, but I didn't put my favorite vehicle in there because my characters are not me. I'm writing a story. I'm creating a person who has their own thoughts, their own personality, their own vehicles that they would choose, and also ultimately their own budget to work off of. I don't have a Mustang. I wish that I had one someday. Maybe I will get one, but I don't have one right now. I don't have the budget for one. And my characters, they don't necessarily have the budget for their dream vehicle or anything either. So the vehicle came to play in a different way. That's a detail you'll find out if you pick up my book someday when I do publish it. And if it's out of the budget for your character, let's say they're a teacher, okay? They're not gonna buy a Lamborghini. It's just not gonna happen on their budget unless they have wealth in the family and from past generations or whatever, and they have an inheritance or something. If you want them to own a Lamborghini and you're dead set on it, make sure they have a job that can afford that vehicle. It just makes sense, because we're not gonna afford a Lamborghini in real life if we do not have a job to support that type of vehicle though. That's really important. Research details, make sure it's realistic with the budget. Now, if you're having trouble describing a vehicle, you're having trouble understanding how you would put that in there, how you would talk about the interior of the car, go sit out in your car for a little while and think of how you would describe it if you were trying to sell it to someone. If you're trying to sell someone on the thought of your vehicle, what would you talk about in there? What do you do? How do you turn on the car? How do you turn on the wipers? Things like that. It'll help you understand how to describe it in your story. However, Don't over detail it. That's another important thing. So think of how you would describe it to sell it and then like cut that in half. That's the detail they need in your story. They need it a watered down version of what a car dealership would be saying to sell it to someone. You want to give them the details that'll work with your story in the future and make sure that they have that to reference to if they need to know a certain detail for that vehicle. So those two things, food and vehicles, are great ways to put detail in your story, great ways to tell the readers about the personality of the characters. If you don't have food or vehicles in your story, think about adding it, because that's giving realistic detail to real life in your story. Because on a daily basis, you use some kind of means of transportation, and on a daily basis, you eat. So if you're doing that, why wouldn't your characters do it? If you are interested, by the way, in following my Facebook page or my blog, those links will both be in the description of this video. As I said before, these videos are an extension of my blog, so if you want more detail on any of these subjects, please visit Tiffany's writing journey through WordPress. That link will be in the description, and the link for all of the Alzheimer's Association will be in the description as well, so you can donate or check out their resources if you are in need of any of that information. Thank you so much for watching this video. Anyone who's following me on any of my social media platforms, I really appreciate your support. Until next time, just keep writing.